channel. This is ICD Movie Reviews. My name is Alan Brinker and welcome back to Spider-Man Week. Last reviews I've done is Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. Now we're going to end the Sam Raimi trilogy off with the most disappointing in the trilogy. Spider-Man 3, which is once again directed by Sam Raimi and Sony into the mix. And this movie still has the same returning cast as the first movie, including Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, Franco, J.K. Simmons, Rosemary. But also we got Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman, we got Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen Stacy, and we got Topher as Eddie Brock / Venom. Now what I've heard is that everyone was really pumped for this movie after the success of Spider-Man 2, which is one of the best superhero films ever made and written. Everyone was pumped for Spider-Man 3, and when Spider-Man 3 came out, a lot of people were very disappointed by the movie, saying it's one of the most disappointing movies of all time, from critics and audiences alike. But what do I think of the movie though? Now here's the thing about Spider-Man 3. Remember in my first Spider-Man review, I did mention that this wasn't the first Spider-Man film I've watched. It wasn't Spider-Man 2 either. It was actually, in fact, Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3 was actually the first Spider-Man film that I've ever watched. And I remember loving this film as a kid, from a guy that has not seen the first two movies. And like, back then, I was a kid. I hated Spider-Man 2 as a kid, and I loved Spider-Man 3 as a kid. I had the toys for it, I had the PS2 game. I remembered loving Spider-Man 2 so much as a kid. Obviously, I didn't see Spider-Man 3 in theaters, but I did have this cam copy of the movie as a kid, because back then, I haven't seen a movie back then in movie theaters. So we have like cam copies of movies that are in theaters. So my dad basically burned Spider-Man 3 into this cam copy, and I watched it repeatedly as a kid. Now here's the thing about Spider-Man 3. Is this film as disappointing as a lot of people said it is? Well, I would say yes, because the first two movies does a great job of setting up the characters and also discovering the world of the characters, and this movie felt much more of a different film than the first two movies. Like, you can literally tell what's different to one another. This film is much more different than the first two movies. But just because I say it's disappointing, it does not mean I hate this film. I honestly think Spider-Man 3 wasn't as bad as people were saying. I wouldn't say this is the worst Spider-Man movie, but I would say out of the entire trilogy, this is definitely the worst in the trilogy. But I like Spider-Man 3. I think Spider-Man 3 has positives, but definitely has much more negatives than the first two movies. And I really want to start off with the negatives first, then the positives. I just want to get the nitpicks and flaws out of the way, because this movie does have much more flaws than the first two movies. I do think one of my biggest issues with Spider-Man 3 is that this movie is a mess. This movie has so many plot conveniences in one go, and you can really tell that Sony is way much in hands than Sam Raimi in this film, because there's a lot of things happening in this film. We get Peter and Mary Jane Watson, they're now in a relationship after the events of Spider-Man 2, and Peter Parker wants to marry MJ. We get Harry Osborn becoming the new Goblin, because I didn't mention in my Spider-Man 2 review that Harry Osborn did find out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, so obviously he thinks Peter Parker killed his father, so he became the new Goblin, and then suddenly had amnesia. Also, we got Flint Marko, played by Thomas Hayden Church, becoming Sandman and trying to provide his daughter by robbing banks, because his daughter is dying, so he's trying to get the money in the wrong way. And also Topher as Eddie Brock comes into the mix and becomes Venom in the third act of the movie. And speaking of Venom, basic plot of this movie, like the one that's mainly focused on, is that the symbiote has landed on Earth with no explanation and grabs onto Peter, turning him into Black Suit Spider-Man, and also emo Peter Parker, which most memes says bully Maguire. And if there's not much plot conveniences enough, we also got some love triangles in this film between MJ and Gwen Stacy with Peter Parker, or Peter Parker and Harry Osborn with MJ. Do you think that's too much plot conveniences? Do you want more? There's another one. Flint Marko / Sandman was actually, in fact, Uncle Ben's killer. Spider-Man 3 has way too much plot conveniences in the film. The film doesn't really know what film it's trying to be. There's a lot of story elements. There's not really a main plot. At least the first two movies have a plot. The first movie is about a kid becoming a hero. Spider-Man 2 is about a kid learning to be a hero. This movie has way too much things happening in the film. I think another one of my biggest issues with the film is actually Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. I really think he plays a much different role in this film than the first two movies. I honestly think Peter Parker in this movie is a complete asshole in the movie. He really does some really dumb stuff in the movie, not just with the symbiote, but also before he had the symbiote. Like, there's a scene in the movie where he kisses Gwen Stacy in front of MJ when he's wearing the red Spider-Man suit. And after that, when Peter was about to propose to MJ, obviously MJ was saying, oh, why did you kiss Gwen Stacy? And Peter looks like he doesn't know what she is talking about, and he's kind of criticizing himself.
I know exactly how you feel. Listen, I have been through this. It happens to me all the time. I see Spider-Man posters in the window. Kids running around with me on their sweaters. It's a big Halloween item. I don't know, I guess I've become something of an icon.
He's basically not likable in this movie, which is a big bummer because you like Peter Parker in the first two movies, and when you watch him in this film, he plays a completely different character. And also, I think Topher Grace as Eddie Brock / Venom is completely miscasted in this film. I really didn't like Topher Grace in this film. I thought he was pretty bad in this film.
He's busy.
Oh, no, I'm just here to talk to you, beautiful.
I love Topher Grace, don't get me wrong. I loved him in that 70s show. It's a very nostalgic show. But in this movie, he's just very miscasted. I feel like someone else could have played Eddie Brock much more better than Topher Grace. And a fun fact is that Sony actually wanted to put Venom in this film, not Sam Raimi. He actually was planning to just put Sandman and the New Goblin. But no, Sony's like, we have to put Venom because everyone loves Venom, so we have to put him in this film. It shows that Sony is much more in charge of directing than Sam Raimi because this film doesn't feel the same than the other films he did. Also, I hate the plot that Harry Osborn has amnesia in the film. It's a big missed opportunity that Harry Osborn should have been the main villain of this film. I really think he should have been because the first two films actually lead up to this moment. Where, you know, in the second Spider-Man film where Harry finds out that Peter killed his father and he found the Green Goblin lair that his father worked in. So, it could have been a great opportunity to end it shortly off with a friendship battle story. I think it would have been so much better and interesting than the plot conveniences that happened in Spider-Man 3. They really pushed Harry more to the side to bring out more villains in the film. And just that dumb scene when he has amnesia and he does that stupid James Franco smile face, it ruins the aspect for me, and I really think James Franco was giving it all his god, but definitely this is my least favorite Harry Osborn that I've seen in the film, even though there is a really great scene in the final act, which I will talk about throughout the positives. I just think the biggest problem with the film is that this film has way too much plot conveniences. This film is a complete mess. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things that shouldn't be in this film either, like Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen Stacy. She didn't need to be in this movie at all. I don't understand why they put her in this film. Is it another thing that Sony wanted to put in? Because it really shows. Because she doesn't do anything in this film besides being a love triangle to Peter Parker and a damsel in distress. That is it. If she wasn't in this film wouldn't make any freaking difference. And I would say this movie is much more special effects heavy than the first two films. When you notice throughout the action scenes, you see a lot of computer generated faces in the film, and it looks really, really dumb. And there's even some really dumb moments in this film, like this scene, for example.
There's a change in the silicon mass.
Yeah, it's probably a bird. It'll fly away when we fire it up.
Seriously, a bird? Hopefully the scientists get fired in Spider-Man 4 if it even does happen. And of course, we're gonna talk about the dancing Bully Maguire moment. I'm not gonna lie, I always love that scene. But it's a nitpick and it's a negative as well because it is way too goofy. At least in Raindrops Can Follow My Head scene in Spider-Man 2, it makes sense why they put that there. But I feel like that whole scene where Peter Parker's dancing in the club and all that stuff, you know, the thing that a lot of people were hating on. For basically, you know, with the emo Peter Parker thing, yeah, that scene, it's pretty guilty pleasure-ish. It's pretty bad. It's pretty terrible. But besides all that stuff, you know, all the plot conveniences, that's probably the biggest issue with the film, is that this film is so all over the place. But I would give Spider-Man 3 this. I think this film is very entertaining. It's not boring at all. The story doesn't drag on or anything. There are plot conveniences, but they never bore me. Some in guilty pleasure perspective, some in good perspective. Spider-Man 3, overall, as a film, it's entertaining, especially the action in Spider-Man 3. I think the action in this movie is really well done. I think, actually, all the action scenes are really well done. The first fight scene between Peter and New Goblin, I thought that fight scene was awesome. The first encounter that Spider-Man has with the Sandman, that's a really fun scene. The other fight scene where Black Suit Spider-Man is fighting Sandman in the train, that's probably my favorite out of the action scenes in this film. A brawl fight between Peter Parker and Harry Osborn in the film, that was a great scene.
Look at little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
And the whole final battle, that is probably one of my favourite moments in this film also. I think the final battle is really great in the film. Even though Venom was just in the film for like the third act and he wasn't developed well, I didn't like Topher Grace in the role, I do think the final battle was really well done. Where you see Spider-Man trying to save MJ once again from Sandman and Venom, and obviously he couldn't do it by himself, and Harry Osborn forgives Peter. He comes as a new Goblin to team up with Peter Parker. I thought that scene was complete awesome. Hopefully that moment is similar that's going to happen No Way Home, where you see Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker and you hear the Spider-Man theme, you know, the Danny Elfman score. I would have been happy. Hopefully it's like what Spider-Man 3 did. Even at the ending in the final act scene where Harry sacrifices for Peter for getting killed by Venom, I think it's very, very heartfelt. I really liked how they basically described that Harry gets killed the same way that Norman Osborn did. I thought that's really clever how they did that, but he did that for friendship reasons and for sacrificing for your best friend reasons. And his death was pretty heartbroken in the film, and the ending itself is very, very heartbroken. So the action in this movie is really well done, and I would say out of all the three movies, this is the most action-packed. This is definitely the most action-packed out of the Sam Raimi trilogy, and the action was really good in the film. It definitely saved the film for me. Also, I think Kirsten Dunst as MJ, or Mary Jane Watson, I call her MJ because it's short. Instead of saying Mary Jane all the time, she's Mary Jane Watson. She's definitely the standout in this movie because she wasn't dumb in the film. There's an arc in this film where basically she gets fired for doing a play because of this one critic, and you really feel sympathy for MJ, and you really feel sympathy how Peter explains things to MJ, saying, oh, Spider-Man gets bad stuff all the time, it's okay. You get why MJ's feeling the way she is, and you feel sorry for MJ in this film. Thomas Hayden Church as Flint Marko/Sandman, I think he does a great job in this film. He's not bad in the film. I get his motivation. He wants to provide money for his daughter because his daughter is dying, and obviously he's doing it for the wrong way, like he's robbing banks and all that stuff. But you get why he's like that. You get his motivation. That whole speech at the end of the movie where Spider-Man and him are talking at the end of the film, I thought that's well done, that he accidentally killed Uncle Ben. I just thought that plot element was just out of nowhere, but it concluded really well that it says, oh, Sandman just did it by accident. He didn't mean it. And I thought that scene was very, very heartbroken. And even that great scene where you see, you know, Flint Marko turn to Sandman, that whole scene where you see him rising from the sand after that experiment with that beautiful score. I don't think Danny Elfman did the score for this movie, but I thought the score in this movie is really, really good, especially for this scene. I thought that scene with Sandman rising up is beautiful. There's no dialogue. It felt like a film on its own. It felt like a silent film, and I thought that scene was really, really well done. Also, J.K. Simmons. Hilarious in this film. I love the scene with the pills.
Drink plenty of water.
Thank you.
That scene cracks me up every single time. And of course, I love the black suit Spider-Man. I love the design of the black suit. I think that aspect of the film was really, really cool in the film, where you see the symbiote crawling up to Peter Parker, and you see the reveal of the black suit. I thought that scene was freaking awesome. I love the design of the black suit. I think the black suit Spider-Man aspects was actually really cool in the film. Yeah, with the dance, that's a flaw, but besides that, I think the black suit is really, really badass in the film. Especially this really cool line that Peter Parker does in this film with Topher Grace.
See you, chump.
What the hell? Overall, guys, Spider-Man 3 is a mess. This film has way too much plot conveniences. There's a lot of things all over the place. There are some things that shouldn't be in this film, and you can tell that Sony is way in hands of this movie than Sam Raimi. Even Sam Raimi said that he was very disappointed how this movie turned out. But as a fun, entertaining movie, I did enjoy this film for good reasons and guilty pleasure reasons. I like Spider-Man 3. I don't love it as much as the first two movies, but it's like when you watch the first two movies, you gotta watch Spider-Man 3 with it. I don't think Spider-Man 3 was as bad as people are saying. There are some really good moments in this film. There are some really bad moments in this film. It's a pretty mixed bag film, but it's entertaining enough. It's still a fun movie, but it is definitely the worst in the trilogy, and I am going to give Spider-Man 3 a C+. So guys, we did it. We reviewed the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Now, we're going to get to the Mark Webb movie. So of course, my next review is going to be the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. That review is coming up very, very soon, so I look forward to that. Let me know what you think of the Sam Raimi trilogy. What is your favorite movie in the Sam Raimi trilogy? Let me know in the comments below. Do you like Spider-Man 3? Do you hate Spider-Man 3? Do you find it okay? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you guys follow me on social media links down below. Facebook, Stardust, Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd. Keep contact with me. And make sure you guys subscribe to my channel for my latest movie reviews and other movie related content. And have a nice day.